I'm honored to be here today, and thanks so much for coming out. I got to say, when I began preparation for this talk, I thought, what can I share with graduates? I don't think I've learned anything since I graduated. But then when you think about perhaps what I knew on day one when I joined WATCOM in the 80s to today, I've probably learned a few things. So I tried to net it out, and I developed, I'd say, 12 lessons. The perspective I took on this was I imagined you're leaving university and you have an idea, or you're joining an organization that already has a product in place. And now what you want to do is fundamentally grow that business. To give you my perspective, and I think what I've done is what's provided this perspective for this talk. As Steve mentioned, I've worked at a variety of software companies. Some of them big, some of them small. Often when folks hear, like I've been at about 6 of them now, and when I tell my friends, I've joined a new organization, they often look at me and say, it sounds so different from the last company you were at. Like you started out in C compilers, and then you were in development tools, and then you're in web content management. And in actual fact, although the individual business may sound different, there's a lot of commonality between them. First of all, they're all software companies. For the past 20 years or so, I've always been in software. My focus has always been business to business. Even in the compiler days, we were selling compilers to companies building products based on our technology, whether it was Intel, Autodesk, Lotus. They were all built using our software. So I've always sold to other businesses. Frankly, I'm not an expert at how Google moves their products or Microsoft, focusing on the consumer market, moves theirs either, the Xbox model. All have focused in terms of global markets. The organizations I've joined have always set out with a mandate to be the leader worldwide. And it's been in a market that is relevant and matters. Not looking at perhaps the next company building an ODBC driver or a piece of technology. These are technologies that have changed the computer landscape, C compilers, databases, application development tools, as well as CRM systems. All real products. I've never joined a company that's more vision than product. And again, sometimes that doesn't seem so sexy. As you've been in the industry, you hear of a latest, greatest technology, and these organizations are often well-funded, and they begin with a very strong vision. The organizations I've been part of have often been more about starting with a great product, starting small, and growing it to win a marketplace. So my experience is very much on a product basis. Passionate about customer success. Now this is a marketing term you hear a lot of use. Like Siebel, I think, was famous for it. Tom was, everything's about the customer. And it sounds good when you say it fast, but I guess there's the other side about being passionate about customer success, and that is delivering on that truthfulness. And I'll never forget the pain of having to deliver on that one day when we were at WATCOM, and it was Christmas Eve, and I was at home, and my parents' phone rang. I was back at my parents' place, and their home phone rang, and Dave Boswell's on the other end going, "We have a customer who's upset." Like, it's Christmas Eve, and he goes, "Well, I've got worse news than that. It's the customer who, on his previous 10 phone calls, actually didn't have a problem. It was his problem in his code." Because remember, we were writing C compilers, and may not be the compiler's problem, could be the programmer's problem. And it was from this customer whose profile was every time they'd reported something, it ended up being in their code. But yet, because of the passion for customer success, we had to fulfill and sit down and understand that problem on Christmas Eve and figure it out. And that's, it sounds good to be passionate about customer success, but often it has to be felt and heartfelt, and you have to deliver on that. So they've all been passionate about customer success. And finally, the common thread with all of them is that, frankly, performance always matters in the software world, and user experience always matters in the software world. I think what made our CRM system great at JANA is we designed it and customized it specifically for investment banks. I don't think what a retail person uses for a customer relationship management system should be the same as what your investment banker's using. Dave Yaz here from RIM, and I was talking to him about handhelds at lunch. I was just going through a little bit of a handheld decision myself. And the new Motorola Q came out versus the BlackBerry. And I was trying to figure out which one I should get. And so I called up a friend of mine who's a gadget gizmo, and I said, so the new Q's coming out. I'm thinking of getting it. You know, I've never liked that BlackBerry form factor. And Q's got the new Microsoft operating, you know, the new mobile system. So like the leader in operating systems is combined with, personally, my favorite cell phone maker. That should be the device for me. He said, don't get it. It takes 2 clicks to get every email off of it. You know, that is user experience. RIM isn't just good at making emails, you know, the push technology and getting your emails fast. It's that they deliver the best user experience. So in every software company I've worked in, it's user experience that differentiates you, and you've got to be able to deliver your products fast. So those are the perspectives and the common threads I've seen in the organizations I've worked for. And that's the perspective I have when I built my talk. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I think it will, you won't see I'm out trying to sell, you know, how to build the next Google, for example. So lesson number 1 is develop an achievable business plan. The key word here is achievable. You can sell a lot of vision. You can go out with a massive vision, but no matter what, you want to set expectations amongst your community, and those are your investors, your employees, and your customers, that what you say you will do. So develop an achievable business plan. Your business plan first has to clearly define the market you are going after. Who is it that you want to sell to? What are the characteristics of that market, and what are the requirements of that market? You then have to look at that target market and define how your product uniquely meets those requirements. What are your competitive differentiators? Now, when you define your target market and you define what your unique differentiators are, if you cannot communicate that pitch in less than 2 minutes and have, whether it's the investor you're speaking to, whether it's the prospect or customer you're speaking to, whether it's a partner you're speaking to, if you cannot communicate that in about 2 minutes, we live in the headline worlds, in the world of headline news today, then that's an issue. So you want to make sure when you develop your business plan, you're able to communicate your competitive differentiators very simply. Your go-to-market strategy. Once you've got your software and your software product, how are you going to sell it? Are you going to package it, sell it as a shrink-wrap software business? That's what we did at WATCOM. We had boxes going out the door. They were being shipped around the world through distributors through distributors out to resellers. We shipped thousands and thousands of boxes a month. That's one way. You know, typically a mass market, high volume marketplace. At the other end of the market, you have what is called an enterprise software strategy. That's where you work with a customer. You begin with your software solution, and you work with a customer to develop an enterprise solution for them. So frequently you'll see it involves the software itself, along with some services to customize the software for that individual. So you can go from high volume, low touch, all the way to low volume, high touch. So you've got to determine your revenue model. You can make, you know, at the end of the day, depending on how you approach it, you can make the same amount of revenue from each, but you've got to determine that model. One model that has become very popular and has changed the marketplace, and especially in the CRM marketplace, is the ASP model. That's another way of delivering software to market. That's where you're charging kind of like a rent per user per month. So if you look at the way Siebel went to market, when you went in and bought a Siebel CRM system, are folks familiar with CRM? I'm just assuming customer relationship management. So when you went in and bought a CRM system from Siebel, when early in the market, they would charge you about $3,000 per user for that software, and then charge you a maintenance fee on top of that. As folks know, Salesforce.com has come into the market now, and you pay anywhere from $50 to $100 a month per user. So it allows smaller organizations to get on with CRM and use the systems. It's a hosted system. I believe their data centers are located anywhere in the world. They host the software, they manage the software, they ensure the system is up and going, and you pay them rent for that. And that's a third model you can consider. So for your software, for your product, you've got to determine your go-to-market strategy. And then finally, you've got to determine your metrics for success. Well, the only metric that matters at the end of the day is revenue. However, as you get to revenue and as you get to profitability, you've got to have some pre-revenue indicators. So what are you looking for there in terms of developing a partner ecosystem, press headlines, analyst reports, visibility in the marketplace? So you want to develop your metrics for success and have an achievable business plan. It's good to look at your business plan quarterly and on an annual basis as part of the management team. The second lesson, hire the right people. We were just talking about this at lunch. I personally believe that the importance of hiring the right people to a certain degree is a function of the company size. At WATCOM, we had a relatively small team. When I joined, we were about 30 folks. I think we got up to about 200. And I remember Dave Litwack, who was the president of Powersoft. That was the company that acquired us. They were the fastest growing software company in North America when they acquired us. They were the hottest IPO on Wall Street. And Dave Litwack came in and looked at our organization. He said, "You've got the highest IQ of any organization I've ever worked with, but your model can't scale quick enough. You can't continue to hire and be so perfectionistic about hiring." And that's because when you're growing an organization at Powersoft, the year we acquired, we totaled to 400 people. Within 18 months, we were about 1,500 people. Hiring people that quickly, when you need to hire people that quickly, you've got to somewhat give up a little bit of your high standards, you might say. This is the toughest thing about an organization, is growing, hiring the right people, bringing them into the right roles. When you're building a team, you want to make sure that you share a vision and a passion for success. You know, one of the large headhunting firms, one of the things they say is folks often hire based on credentials and what's on the resume. They'll look through the resume. Folks will get the job because it's the right experience match. Most frequently, the folks separate, and I do believe it is a separation. It's a relationship folks have with an organization. Most frequently, the reason folks separate from their company is actually cultural. And so you want to make sure when you're building a team, you share that vision, that cultural fit, and that passion for success. And it's something you should consider when you're hiring somebody. I personally have interviewed a number of great candidates who on paper, and I meet with them, their experience is right, but something in my gut tells me no, and I will not go against my gut when it comes to hiring. You've got to empower the team and set objectives. At Siebel, they were fastidious about objectives. Now, they did have an employee relationship management system, like a customer management system. You set your objectives quarterly as part of your business plan. So at the end of quarter, within 2 days, every employee had to have their objectives submitted to the manager. At the end of quarter, you reviewed those objectives and your bonuses were paid on reaching those objectives. It was a fabulous mechanism. It kept your eyes on the prize. As an employee and as a manager, you knew what folks on your team were responsible for. At the highest levels of the organization, you know, the objectives were set on that department. So it gave management a very clear way of ensuring the organization, this fast-growing organization, which at the time was about 7,000 people, was set to deliver on the corporate objectives. So I think setting objectives and empowering the team is important. The one caution I would make, having gone through the Siebel experience, as much as I thought setting those objectives and managing them on a company basis was good, there were a couple aspects to it that were a little bit too rigorous. One was that quarterly reviews were a little too frequent. Often when you set out to deliver a project, it takes more than a quarter. And so how can you say this will be all wrapped up nicely by the end of the quarter? So that was one aspect. I think doing it every 6 months is a little bit more appropriate. The other aspect to setting the objectives is that you need flexibility to change. At Siebel, once they were in the system, there was no change. So for instance, halfway through the quarter, let's say budgets went up or budgets went down and a program was slashed, you would have to give the employee a 0 on recognition there, and that directly affected them. So you need to be able to have some flexibility in changing those. Another key thing, and especially in a startup, is building a team and having respect amongst that team. One thing, and this was in the early days of software companies, and I know we suffered from this a bit at Siebel or at WATCOM, but we were all the same. I was about as different as you got, I guess. You know, we hired smart people. They were all developers, and when you put them in a room, you end up with a really great product. But you do need financial folks, you need marketing folks, you need support, you need other types of folks. So when you're building a team, you know, bring in the different talent pools that you require and ensure that the relationships amongst those talent pools are very respectful. Once you get them in the door, that's the great part. Work hard to keep them. When you've got the right team together, it actually becomes easy to keep them on board, but make sure you have the right programs and cultural fit so people want to stay. We were talking about this at lunch, and it's amazing what a great job Sybase Anywhere has done to retain their employees. I think they've probably got the longest, you know, many of the folks I joined there with in 1983 are still there today, which for a high-tech organization is amazing. Celebrate success. When folks are focused on the objectives and they know what the team does, celebrate success. Have parties when revenue goals are met, when big customer wins happen. Celebrate and bring folks together on regularly informal basis. Ice Cream Fridays, I think, is one that RIM does in town. And recognize issues and take action. You know, if there isn't a fit, either move the person to a new role, understand where they can add value, or move them out. And you got to do that quickly. So now you've got an organization, you've got your business plan, you've got the right people on board. You got your product. What's next? Selling it. And again, to sell it, you've got to perfect your pitch. You've got to make it fast, and you've got to make it short, sweet, and compelling. The objective here with the pitch is to win the business and to grow the constituents that matter, whether you're focused on your investors, your customers, or the components outside of that in your marketplace, your partners and your industry analysts. So the attributes of a good pitch, in my experience, again, we do live in the headline news world. Nobody gives you an hour to tell your full story. You've got to get them interested and enough to ask that first question, tell me more. You've got to somewhere under 10 minutes to make that happen, frequently under 5. You've got to make it compelling. And that's why I call it hook, line, and sinker. You've got to have the hook that hits you in under 5 to 7 minutes. Then when they say, tell me more, you need to be able to present the detail in a compelling fashion for that listener or for that individual. And then you need to close it to ensure that they want to take next steps with you. So make your pitch, make it in 3 parts. The hook, make it a compelling pitch, somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes. When they say, tell me more, be able to tell your story in a variety of ways so it continues to stay of interest and you hit the key criteria for that individual, and then make sure they want to have follow-up with you. One key thing to the pitch is make sure it's scripted. Everybody in your organization should be able to deliver your pitch perfectly. And again, that's part of sharing the vision. The other piece that is critically important is the tough questions you get asked. So there's a series of tough questions you'll typically find once you've got your presentation down, that certain tough questions. When you're part of a startup, questions such as funding are the common one. Tell me about your key customers. What happens if you get taken over? Make sure those tough questions are scripted and you can look that person in the eye and answer them clearly and articulately. And finally, when you're in the startup mode, and I guess the frame of mind I'm thinking of here is where you're an organization and you're just starting out. And so now you've got the product and you want to go to market. Deliver your pitch a lot and to all of your market constituents, specifically your sales, your prospects. Go out, deliver it, and perfect it. Talk every minute of every day. Talk to prospects as well as partners, both your product partners, the folks who add to your product to deliver it to marketplace, as well as your sales partners, whether it's your consulting partners who are going to help you deliver it and install it in organizations, or whether it is your resellers. So perfect the pitch. So now that you've got the product and you're out delivering the pitch to a lot of new prospects and the partners, what you've actually done is you've developed a sales pipeline. Because hopefully, assuming you went out and gave that pitch and you had immediate traction and the guy said, tell me more, I want to buy, or tell me more, I want you to, respond to this RFP. So assuming you've now got some leads as a result of delivering this pitch, all of a sudden you have to begin to develop your sales methodology. So this is a very standard sales methodology that you see every day. The first thing is you've got some leads. Those are the folks who knock on your door and say, deliver me the pitch. Then you've got who we call prospects. Those are folks who, after the initial pitch is done, says, I would like to take action. I would like more information. I would like a demo. I would like you to join an RFP. So they're folks who are qualified prospects. Typical qualifications include they have budget, so there's money that they're going to spend with your organization, hopefully. There is interest. There is a compelling event. That means they need the product and there is a business reason for them to spend the money with your organization. So you start with your leads. Those leads become prospects or qualified leads. You typically, between the prospect stage and the shortlist stage, there's some competitive nature going on here. So once you find an account that you're beginning to work, you'll typically find that prospect is talking to you and a few of your competitors. And so, often you'll find they could be talking to, initially everybody out there, 5 or 10 different, looking at 5 or 10 different solutions and ways of solving their problem. So the goal of this next stage is to become on the short list, get down to the top 1 or 2. You'll typically find, especially in an enterprise decision process, they'll get you down to the top 1 or 2. And it's at this stage where you've been shortlisted, and now the critical element is closing it. So right now, I work for a company that sells storage management software. And on our short list for our criteria here, once we've been shortlisted, the next one is to push it over the edge. There we turn to our customer references, our experience in the scenario. Once you're on the short list to get to the selected list, you may do a proof of concept. So you want to get the customer close enough to your product, close enough to your product, and close enough to experience your product so that they feel comfortable with. Finally, you are selected. And I got to say, early on, I thought once you were selected, that was it. That means you won the deal. But this is actually where contract negotiation steps in. And this is where, when I was selling C compilers, there wasn't a lot of contract negotiation. The guy would call up, and he'd call our 800 line. He'd say, here's my Visa number. A company may buy 10 of them at once. And when we were selected, we'd won the deal. When you're working with CRM systems or enterprise software where the deals are multiple millions of dollars, this selected to winning the customer can take a few months just in contract negotiations. So this selected stage is important. It means you've eliminated the competition, but now you step into the customer contract negotiation. One little lesson I've learned, I'd say, here at this point is when we are shortlisted, with enterprise organizations, we typically put out our licenses immediately. So we get, while you're working through the shortlist process, you get their legal team working on all the contract negotiations. So, because as soon as you're selected, you want to just get the cash and start the business. So you want to develop a sales methodology. That's lesson number 4. And understand ways and milestones to measure each of those key attributes for your business. So now you've got a sales pipeline and you've got customers, perhaps if you haven't taken on marketing yet, but you've got customers coming in and you're starting to close some small deals. The next thing to do is develop a revenue model and understand the business that you're going after. You want to have metrics to measure that success. So in organizations that I've been associated with, we hold weekly management sales calls where we very fastidiously cover the sales pipeline. Understand where the deals are in the pipeline and the opportunity to close. You want to be able to revenue and forecast your upcoming revenue. So the metrics often used are, first of all, the revenue metrics. Depending on your go-to-market model, your revenue could be software revenue. That's what people actually pay for your product. The services revenue, That's your services or your consulting organization where you bill them out per day. They're your consultants who go out and install and service the product. And then you've got your ongoing maintenance revenue. Often in a software business, you'll find you sell the software, the licenses up front for a fee, and you charge an annual maintenance fee so the customer can continue to get those upgrades. Maintenance fees typically run about 16 to 18% of the upfront fee. So you want to model your revenue. You want to understand the expected close date. And it isn't, on that last slide, I showed when you win the business, again, in the WATCOM day, we got the visa and there was the money and it was all there. We could recognize the revenue immediately. However, depending on your model, you may not be able to recognize that revenue immediately. So you want to understand when you get those contracts signed and when that revenue can be recognized. Let me walk you through a couple different revenue recognition issues, and this has caused some very large software organizations some pain. So in the world of WATCOM, when we sold our shrink-wrap software, we sold it directly over the phone via telesales, as I'd mentioned. We also sold it to resellers. Well, those resellers would place large orders based on how many they sold last month. But it wasn't necessarily always consistent, if you're at Egghead or, I don't know, is Egghead still around? CompUSA, I guess. But they used to put out the displays, and maybe some weeks more people picked up the product than others. So the revenue recognition in that scenario, although we shipped so many products out the door, we didn't necessarily recognize it all. We actually held some back to watch what the flow through and sales were going to be. At Bycast today, we do it based on once the software is deployed. So even once the customer signs the agreement, we do not recognize the revenue until services goes in and installs it and the software is deployed in the account. So we do it based on a percentage completion is how we recognize revenue. So you've got to understand the expected close date and revenue recognition, because at the end of the day, it's the revenue rec that the investors look at. Monitor your success. Channel matters. So depending on how you're selling your software to market, if you're selling it directly, whatever you sold it for is what you're bringing into the organization. If you sell it through a channel, you typically give away some margin to that channel. So you need to understand the channel that you sell through. The sales stage is very closely associated with the close date. So whether they are a qualified prospect or if you've been selected. And that associates with the probability. Every week you need to know what the next steps are on every deal, and especially in the enterprise software world. You want to ensure that when you're working to close that business, you understand what are the next 3 things that customer wants you to do to win the business. The second aspect to things, once you're forecasting that model and looking at that and watching your sales forecasts on a weekly basis, is to develop your win-loss reports. The deals you lose can tell you as much about your business as the deals you win. So develop win-loss reports. In my experience, loss reports are very painful to extract from the sales organization. They do not, these guys are the big optimists. I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell a lot of software. And when they lose, they just take it very personally and want to bury that fact. So, so it's important my role I often find is to sit down with the person and understand it and try to watch the trends there. So work hard to get those loss reports. They can tell you a lot about the business. So now we've got the product, we've got some leads coming in, we've got a sales methodology. Well, the next thing that is hopefully forming with you, again, the purpose here is to build a world-class software company. And just like in math, if you can reduce it to a previously solved problem, the business will grow a lot faster. So now that you've had a few deals come in, you're starting to see some trends in the marketplace. And so you want to define your repeatable selling motion with milestones. At Bycast, we actually have what looks like a flow chart to show our sales process perfectly mapped out. We have, when customers knock at our door, they fall into 2 groups. They're either looking for storage or looking for a product in the healthcare space called a PACS. We know exactly what to say to each of those customer types. So map out your sales process. Understand the types of customers who are walking into the door. When those customers come into the door, have customized sales tools to advance them through the sales process. So define a sales process, and I mean to the degree where you have a flow chart that shows the decision points and what the possible outcomes are. Throughout your sales process, identify the key constituents at every step. So again, I'm just going to come back to my experience at Bycast. I'll tell you a little bit more about the company. We sell storage management software. Our first vertical market we focus on is healthcare. And in the healthcare space, what they do is, X-rays have gone from film to digital. And so believe it or not, like the KW hospital probably produces as much data as, the Royal Bank downtown. Like they are producing in storage data, they're producing a significant amount of data. And this has caused healthcare institutions a huge problem because, maintaining that amount of data and their traditional approach to storage is just drop it on a SAN, grow your SAN. Well, now with all this digital data coming in, they can no longer just drop it on that expensive media. They want to be able to look at their storage system and be smart enough so that their less used data, or your old X-rays, can seamlessly move off that expensive SAN storage and onto some other media such as tape. So in this healthcare space, as I'd mentioned, they got this flow of digital data, your X-rays, your MRIs coming in. The machine that produces, or the application that manages that data is called a PACS system. And so the PACS system is purchased at the hospital by radiology. And yet storage is bought by the IT department. So in our sales process, we know at the end of the day, we need to get approval from both the radiology department and the IT department. And within healthcare, radiology has always run as their own business unit. They've actually gone out and bought a bunch of hardware, and they do not want to involve IT, and IT doesn't want to involve radiology. But we know at the end of the day, in our sales process, that when it comes down to cutting the check, if both decision makers haven't agreed, there's a problem. And we've found that as we got down the sales process where we believe we've been selected and only IT is in the room, all of a sudden we get a call and they say, the radiologists want a demo. And now we've been moved back from selected to earlier in the process. So you need to be able to recognize the participants that need to be involved, who are the key decision makers in the account, who are the key opinion leaders from a technology and a usability point of view, and who are the executives signing the check. And you want to make sure as you move through your sales process, you've engaged with the right folks. From a company side, you need to involve the right folks. And the interesting balance here is, a business runs on profits, right? And so you cannot be investing everything in every deal. You want to, make it so you keep the highest, run a high margin business. So what you want to do is spend your resources on qualified deals. So initially, when a lead comes in, you'll find sales is involved. They're the guys who work to get it from that prospect stage from the lead stage to the prospect stage. At the prospect stage, that's where you say, okay, now I've got a qualified lead. Let's bring in some more talent from the organization. That's where you could bring in your product managers or your technical field to sell the technical aspects of the product. And then later at the qualified stage, once you've been selected, that's where you bring in the services folks to roll out a proof of concept. So you'll notice as deals become more qualified, your organization can spend more resources on it. So as you go through the sales process, identify the key decision makers, know who needs to be involved in the process from a company point of view, and also know who needs to be involved in the process from a sales point of view. And develop the right sales tools to get through that process. Product literature, market intelligence, again, the FAQ is critical. Know your strengths and weaknesses. I was at sales training this week for one of our partners. And the sales guy, his first question, he said, listen, thanks for showing up, but can you tell me all the warts of your product? That was all he wanted. He said, I've heard all the good aspects to it, but what I have to sell against are the problems. So if you can tell me what all your problems are and tell me how to sell around them. So understand your strengths and your weaknesses. Identify the sales hurdles. With a startup, first one is the risk associated with company size. At Bycast, how we got around that was developing partnerships with leading storage vendors, both HP and IBM. You also have to identify from a product point of view, understand your sales hurdles from competitive, the fit with the existing infrastructure, how quickly you can roll it out. And you need to develop assets to overcome these hurdles. The way I think about this is develop tools so that you can turn your biggest pessimist or your biggest competitor into a champion. What kind of tools do you need? You need the answers to the questions, to the frequently asked questions. You need the right demos. You need the right the right customer success stories. And in the sales process, always speak the language of the person you're talking to. What I mean there, if you're speaking to a technical person in the account, make sure you're addressing their particular needs. If you're speaking to a business unit person in the account, make sure you're speaking their particular needs. So for example, at Bycast today, when we're talking to the radiologists, we talk in terms of how fast they will get their studies back from their PACS system, how the high availability of their PACS system. When we're talking to the technical folks, we talk about speeds and feeds of the hardware. We look at performance benchmarks. We look at availability statistics. We look at the underlying infrastructure of the grid technology. Develop market confidence. So now that you've got the product, you've got to develop confidence with the market. Every startup I've been in, I would say, has that first big deal where customers say, I trust them now. And I remember at WATCOM vividly somebody when they were like, oh, geez, I'm trying to decide between Microsoft or WATCOM. WATCOM's got a way better compiler, but they're small. And somebody standing beside them said, you know what, but Novell red boxes them. Novell will never let them go under. And so having those first big deals will give the market the confidence that your organization will be there for the long run. So at WATCOM, we had Novell. At LivePage, we had all the IEEE publications published using our technology. At JANA, we had Allstate as well as Goldman Sachs, and then we went on to win all of Wall Street. And at Bycast, today, what we started with was we won a few small deals. In all of those deals, they were run on HP hardware. We got on the HP radar screen. We won a massive deal. Banner Health is one of the leading healthcare institutions in the States. They're spread across 4 states. And as a result of those wins, HP OEM'd our product. So you want to win those first deals to build that market confidence. This is simple. Once you've got the wins, promote the heck out of them. Secure customer references as part of the deal. Sign them up to the customer reference program and be willing to give them better pricing to secure that agreement. As soon as you win the customers, take action quickly to promote the wins. Get rights to company logos, executive quotes. Announce the win immediately, preferably within 24 hours. It would be great, along with the deal being complete, you have the press release there for sign off to put out the next day. One of the key things is to be able to tell, and especially when you're in a startup in those early days where, frankly, you might have 8 or 10 wins, how to tell those stories a bunch of different ways so that depending on the market and the customer you're talking to, it is an attractive and an interesting pitch. Look at the breadth of the number of customers, so the number of logos you show on your website, as well as the depth of those customers. You'll find customers query you 2 ways. They want to understand the number of customers you have and how many folks have built their business around your technology. So they look for adoption across the enterprise. So next thing is, so far most of my speech has been focused on developing a direct channel model. One of the things you need to consider is, should I develop a channel strategy? And maybe the answer is no. You know, we can go direct. At JANA, we took a direct model up until about the last 9 to 12 months of our business. All of our business was done direct. We won most of Wall Street direct. And it wasn't until we had virtually won all of Wall Street, we'd been knocking on all the big service providers' doors at Deloitte and Accenture, and frankly, these guys were saying, we're making lots of money off Siebel today. And then when we won most of Wall Street, I'll never forget, Friday afternoon we got a phone call, and they said, we have 25 Deloitte partners coming to your offices on Tuesday for training. Could you make that happen? And Bill and I looked at each other, and Bill said, no way, there aren't 25 Deloitte partners showing up. That many egos couldn't fit in a room. You know what? 25 Deloitte partners showed up. And it went from begging folks to service our product to 25 Deloitte partners showing up. So it's, you know, you work the channel a long time, and it's your wins that finally win them. So the service partners are critically important. OEM, that's, you know, depending on your product, you may be able to find OEM relationships within the marketplace. Value-added resellers, they're the folks who build businesses around your products. Distributors, I've mentioned. And your channel strategy will evolve as your organization changes. As I mentioned at Jana, we started out direct. We worked hard to get channels. Frankly, until we won the business on Wall Street, they didn't turn our way. And then once we had the traction on Wall Street, we began to exploit those channels. And you need to develop a plan for success. When you're building that channel strategy, you need to understand how they're going to make money. That's the name of the game. They're working with you to make money. So you need to understand their revenue model, and you need to be prepared to invest with them for mutual success. In my mind, good marketing is critical. I started out in tech support. I think I really cut my teeth in tech support, and it was because I listened to the customer, I think, that led me into marketing. I love talking to customers and understanding the customers. I think if I had to define the responsibilities of marketing, it's public relations, so being the external face to your organization, public relations analysts, industry leaders, branding and awareness. Sometimes when you're talking to marketing folks, this is all they focus on is the brand. I think branding is very important, and marketplace awareness is very important, but especially as the organization grows. Lead generation, so in addition to going out, you know, how you develop that pipeline and that funnel at the end, that's the responsibility of marketing. And getting marketing to generate qualified leads. I remember in one of my organizations, I went up to a trade show booth, and the guy who runs the booth was there, and he was out in the hallways just stopping anybody and collecting cards. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, leads, we need leads. And I'm like, okay, but who are these guys? And, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I get qualified on leads. The more leads we collect at this trade show, the bigger my bonus. And I was like, whoa. So I ran a little test. I spoke to a really good customer at the show, and I handed him my lead. And I said, here you go, pal, take this. And of course, I kept the name myself. So 2 days later, I came back and I called him up and I said, okay, where's my lead? You know, I want to talk. I handed you over that lead the other day. Where's that one really good lead? And he said, it's in the bag with the other 8,000. Okay, that's not the job of marketing. When you get a lead, you need to know the good ones. So when you're in lead generation, you need to develop the pipeline, and you need to take responsibility for keeping the qualified ones and understanding who they are. The other critical thing about marketing is that you can go out and generate all the leads. You need to support sales. What our organizations run on at the end of the day is the revenue, and you need to understand to develop those sales tools to support the entire sales process. Product literature, scripted demos, RFP responses, you know, the press, what that article says that you can include in your RFP response to what you can deliver in that RFP response. And finally, a marketing person, in my mind, absolutely requires a business as well as a technical expertise, especially in a startup. Folks who are just marketing in a tech startup, they need to understand the product and they need to understand the market. So you need that absolute mix. And finally, I have a three-thing rule, and I follow this. And I'm sure some of my friends here have been on the good side of this and the bad side of this. But in my world, I think everything just takes three things. When I wake up in the morning, I have a very long to-do list. And every morning I kind of wake up and I say, what are the three things I'm going to get done today? And I reshuffle the priorities, and I look at them from both a strategic nature as well as a tactical nature, and just try to get the most important three things done. I also use my three-thing rule when I'm talking to folks. And my three-thing rule when I meet with folks at the end of the day after I've given an investor or a press person my pitch is, what three things would he remember or she remember about what I just said? So I follow the three-thing rule to keep myself organized as well as when I'm communicating with folks. And thanks so much. So I'm happy to address questions or... When I sit down and meet with somebody from IT in hardware, they are so concerned about just what I call little details, like what is it serial ATA or fiber connected? What's the speeds and feeds of that particular disk? It is very specs oriented, and 5 nines availability and high availability. So within the hardware space, I can tell you it is far more technical, spec sheet almost oriented than it is in software, where typically you're selling a solution. And so I think actually Bycast, in some regards, one of our biggest differentiators in our go-to-market is we're often perceived as a hardware play, and yet when we go in and sell our solution, folks immediately say, well, what about the speeds and feeds? And we say, oh, here's the spec sheet on that, but we deliver all those speeds and feeds, but we're going to make a difference to your business. So I can't comment on the difference with shoes. I'd say, again, shoes are consumer-oriented. I think marketing to consumers is far more fickle than marketing to businesses. In the business world, the decision's much more rational, and you can model it out a lot more easily. Now, I would say the following, that folks need to live their script. So you need to start with a script. So folks, we're just launching a telesales department at Bycast. So I've just been through very much kind of your question. We launched a telesales department, and we began with scripting the individual. This person actually had never been in storage sales previously. She had sold other software. So we started her out with some scripts. And she could deliver those scripts very well and answer the key questions. But she wouldn't deliver them with the passion, you might say, that's really required to close the business. However, she could at least relay the information well enough so that the customer would say, excellent, I'd like more information. Now she's been with us for about 2 months. She's learned about the market, about the product. She's understood, now she understands the scripts, and she started to live the scripts. So she's kind of now pushed the scripts aside, and she finally has the breadth she has to turn them into her own. But I think scripts are critical when you're not at the stage of that you haven't embodied the script yet. So within sales, I would always recommend starting with a script, but you'll find as folks begin to live and breathe, and the organization and the product and the market becomes second nature to them, they'll push them aside and live their own, use their own words. But I've never employed a market research organization as a startup. And as you say, it's very expensive. Now, I can't actually answer why that is. I think one of the key things when I said get out and live that pitch every minute of every day, what you are doing at that stage is your market research to a certain degree. One of the things when you're delivering that pitch, you need to listen. It isn't just talking, it is more listening to what the customers are saying and what they're not saying. If your pitch hasn't generated that traction you were expecting, that's the market data you need. So I think that that first round, when you're going out and meeting with the prospects and meeting with the customers, meeting with the partners, meeting with the industry analysts, that's the market research you need. So that's my approach to market research, and it's listening to what they're saying and what they're not saying.
But what is a RFP?
A request for a proposal. So when a business goes out, and to give you an idea, they can range from anything to like, here's an RFP, it's written on 1 page, answer these 10 questions about your product, to we recently had a submission or RFP that the RFP questionnaire was 150 pages, and they said response should not exceed 300 pages. And we had a hard time meeting that. So they can be quite troublesome. Like when you say mom and pop shop, are you thinking local? Or so are you, for some reason you're going to define it just on a city or regional basis? Yeah. then clearly, yeah, go ahead.
That's more like in not looking to even hire lots of employees, but just in being able to stay small and working one-on-one with people.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, for example, it was lesson 2, I think, hire the right people.
Right.
Not hiring people.
Right.
Kind of do it yourself, not expanding that.
Right. Well, again, it's tough to give a comment without really understanding the product because, you know, what my gut just initially says, like, you know, with the web these days, why would you have to define anything locally? You know what I mean? Like a mom and pop shop could be a website, and that has a global audience, right? It isn't just so locally defined. If you define it locally, you're probably looking at some type of services organization. You know, it's difficult to build a software business where you're not either going to sell a lot of volume or sell lots of massive deals, right? Like it's one of the other if you're looking at doing a software organization. So chances are you'd be looking at more a services-led approach where you're dealing with individual customers and delivering a solution to them based on, you know, someone else's software. That approach to market's quite a bit different because there what you're selling is your individual talents to the organization, which again, you know, is quite a bit different in terms of the revenue model, in terms of your cost analysis, things like that. At Bycast, I think we were the first folks to take this approach with respect to storage, a storage approach. We've actually verticalized it. When we go in and sell a solution, we deliver a solution for a particular vertical. So we focus first on healthcare, and we looked at the problem space associated with storage in healthcare. Again, as I mentioned, these hospitals have millions of digital studies coming in. And so when we go in and meet with them, we talk to them about the number of studies they're experiencing a year, the fact that they have to keep that data forever. I don't know of any hospitals deleting data, which is different than all of us. So every 3 to 5 years, that IT administrator is going to have to move that data off that serial ATA drive onto another one. That's a business challenge, a storage business challenge associated with healthcare that no one else has. So when we went to market, we looked at the storage market and we said, okay, where fix this kind of data, who is having these exploding data volumes? We sell storage or storage software. So the more data, the better for revenue in our case. We looked at all the different markets, whether financial services, media, entertainment. Healthcare had the toughest challenges and was the biggest. And that's the one we went after market. And I guess, you know, again, we didn't employ to your question earlier, we didn't employ a market research firm. We did our own.
So we have a reception now planned in 1301 around the corner in the glass fishbowl or whatever we call it today. So please join us, everyone, in the room next door.